Hello guys, my name is Charlie Reynolds. I have a day in the life story of mine for you to help you fall asleep. I like subscribers and extreme sports. It was a normal day. I woke up in my bed, although somehow my pillow had been replaced with a cold lasagna. I didn't question it. I never do. I slid my feet into my slippers, which turned out to be 2 wet hamburger buns. I stood up, stretched, and yawned so hard my neighbor's dog started barking. I ignored him. He's an idiot. In the bathroom, I brushed my teeth with mustard. The minty one ran out last week. Mustard foams better anyway, and it keeps the rats away. That's what the mirror told me. After that, I gave my wife a watermelon. She didn't look up. She never does. I'm not even sure she's alive anymore. Sometimes I poke her with a stick just to check. I packed my bag with the essentials: 1 sock unwashed, a remote that doesn't work but feels important, and a spoon that whispers things I try not to understand. I opened the door, then closed it, then opened it again. Rituals are important. Stepping outside, I tripped over my mailbox. It was lying on the sidewalk again, looking smug as hell. I kicked it. It bit me. Mailboxes are territorial. I was hungry. My stomach sounded like 2 raccoons fighting in a tuba. I hadn't eaten since I mistook a candle for a bratwurst last night. My mouth still smells like vanilla sadness. I tried to remember if I had to work today. I flipped a coin. It landed on its edge. That meant yes. On my way to the bus stop, I got stuck between 2 parked cars for 10 minutes. Not physically, existentially. I just didn't know how to go forward. A squirrel threw a nut at me. I threw back my shoe. I lost. Eventually I made it to the bus stop. A woman with 6 hats was staring at me like I owed her milk. The bus arrived upside down. I climbed in through the emergency window like always. Inside, the bus was full of toasters in business suits. One of them was giving a PowerPoint on emotional resilience. I nodded supportively. The toaster gave me a thumbs up. I started to cry. I got off 3 stops early because I forgot where I worked. Fortunately, my legs remembered. They dragged me there while I screamed at a pigeon who looked like my cousin. At the office, I greeted Ted, my co-worker. He's a chair. Ted was upset because someone sat on him backwards this morning. Very disrespectful. My cubicle smelled like burnt toast and desperation. I sat down and pressed the button that says "Do you not press?" It buzzed, then laughed at me. Happens daily. At 11:37 a.m. I attempted to eat my stapler. It resisted. I admired that. By noon I was starving. I chewed on my mouse pad. It tasted like betrayal. My boss Greg walked by wearing a cape and eating yogurt with his fingers. I asked for a raise. He handed me a spoon and said, "This is all you'll ever be." Fair enough. After work I went to the grocery store. The automatic doors tried to eat me again. I yelled, "Not today, demons," and slid through sideways. I bought a loaf of air, some liquid cheese, and an argument with a cashier who accused me of being too round. On the way out, I tripped on a cart and landed face first in a promotional display for pickles. The manager applauded. I bowed. At home, my wife was still staring at the chessboard. The couch had evolved into a slightly better couch. I think it's winning. I took a bath in the kitchen sink while arguing with a sponge. Then I dried off with a hairdryer that only blows cold air and insults. For dinner I boiled a potato, then whispered all my secrets into it. Then I ate it. Therapy isn't cheap. I sat down to watch TV. The TV stared back. We had a moment. Then came the worst part, trying to sleep. I went to bed, but my brain wouldn't shut up. It kept listing every mistake I've made since 1994. I told it to stop. It giggled. I tried counting sheep, but they kept turning into debt collectors. I owe them more than I care to admit. At 2 a.m. I heard the fridge humming the national anthem backwards. At 3 a.m. I was arguing with the ceiling about taxes. Eventually I passed out hugging a rolled-up rug I thought was my childhood friend Brian. He smelled better than I remembered. The laundromat years. There was a time I spent a lot of hours in laundromats, not because I needed clean clothes but because I liked the way the dryers whispered secrets when no one was looking. I met a sock once that had been inside 12 machines and claimed to have visited other dimensions. I believed him. We played chess on a pizza box and discussed philosophy until he vanished in the spin cycle. I still mourn him. His name was Harold. Life as a life coach. One morning I became a life coach for ants. I made tiny charts and motivational posters that said things like 1 crumb at a time and you are ant-stoppable. I gave lectures under the sink. The Queen sent me a thank you note made of chewed paper and soap. I wept. I'm still waiting on payment. Elevator enlightenment. I once spent 8 hours in an elevator because I thought I was the elevator. People got in, pushed buttons, and I whispered ding when we stopped. One woman cried. Another one tipped me. I took that as a sign I was doing the right thing. Then security escorted me out and I whispered going down as I left. The Festival of Fridges. One summer I attended a music festival hosted entirely by refrigerators. I didn't plan to go. I just followed the smell of cold cheese and despair. There were bands like Crushed Ice and the Moldy Lettuce Quartet. I danced with a mini fridge named Marvin. We talked about dreams. He said his was to be a wine cooler. I support him fully. The lobster dream. Last week I had a dream that I was a lobster in a corporate job. I wore a tie. I filed taxes. My claws clicked nervously as I asked for more vacation days. I was denied. I pinched my boss and was promptly boiled. I woke up screaming in butter. The door that doesn't lead anywhere. There's a door in my hallway that leads nowhere. I open it sometimes to yell things like I forgive you, or I never liked raisins, and then close it again. It makes me feel powerful. Last Thursday the door whispered back. I didn't like that. The day I became a window. Once I became a window. People looked through me. I saw things, a child licking a cactus, a dog debating the economy with a frog, an old woman moonwalking. I stayed a window for 3 days until the wind insulted me. I shattered out of spite. The sink rebellion. My sink rebelled last month. It refused to drain unless I sang to it. I spent hours performing love ballads to a drain hole. It burbled in harmony. I think we're dating now. The Jell-O incident. There was an incident involving 27 bowls of lime Jell-O and a misunderstanding with the mailman. Legally I can't go into detail, but I'm no longer allowed near post offices on Tuesdays. The ceiling fan apocalypse. My ceiling fan once tried to lead a coup. It spun faster and faster while chanting something in Morse code. I unplugged it. It cursed me. I haven't had a good night's sleep since. Final thoughts. Life is confusing. Sometimes your cereal talks back. Sometimes your curtains flirt with you. Sometimes you wake up as a sandwich. But you keep going. You keep walking. You keep pretending the shopping cart you pushed into traffic didn't scream. Anyway, thanks for listening. I'll be back tomorrow, maybe. Unless the mailbox union finds me. Good night. And remember, don't trust the spoons. I thought I would wake up. I did not. Maybe I never did. The dream did not end. It just changed resolution, like life downgraded to 144p, and someone spilled Sprite on my memory card. I found myself face down in a carpet made entirely of old homework assignments and chicken bones. My alarm clock was screaming again, but this time it was actually a blender filled with marbles. I unplugged it and thanked it for its service. Breakfast was a glass of warm milk and a spoonful of irony. I tried to spread butter on a slice of existential dread, But the knife kept whispering, "You do not deserve happiness. Bread is." So I used a fork instead. Bread is. I opened the door and stepped outside. The sky was the color of spoiled yogurt, and birds flew in reverse. One of them shouted, "Taxes," and then disappeared into a wormhole. Normal Tuesday. As I walked toward what I assumed was work, a street preacher stopped me. He had a cardboard sign that read, "The end is Tuesday, probably." I asked, "Which Tuesday?" He just wept. Halfway down the street, a trash can challenged me to a duel. I declined. I have learned not to fight with things that smell like my soul. A little girl approached me and gave me a drawing of a duck. I thanked her. She said, "It is not a duck, it is your therapist." I put it in my pocket. That would come in handy later. I tried to catch the bus but ended up sitting on a moving bench that thought it was an Uber. It took me to an abandoned shopping mall that had been converted into a spiritual gym. The instructor was a jellyfish named Darren. I signed a waiver and stretched my regrets. Darren made me do squats while shouting affirmations like, "Your shame is biodegradable, and capitalism cannot hurt you here." I wept. My legs vibrated. A raccoon handed me a towel. After the session, I wandered into a smoothie bar run entirely by lizards. One of them offered me a drink called the Divorce Cleanse. I drank it. My kidneys filed a complaint. A woman asked if I believed in past lives. I said yes. She said I looked like someone who used to be a broken stapler. I thanked her. She paid for my drink. Then I found myself at the edge of a parking lot made of mirrors. I stared at my reflection until it yawned and walked away. I chased it. That led me into a Walmart that only sold regrets and misprinted motivational posters. One read, "Be yourself, unless you suck." I bought 3. I was starting to feel like I needed a break from reality. So I visited a reality spa. They offered services like thought rebooting and memory pressure washing. I signed up for the brain sauna. Inside, a man in a robe poured boiling water over a pile of old tweets while chanting self-care. The steam smelled like failed potential. I felt relaxed. Then came the wheelchair. Not because I needed it, because it called to me. I saw it by a vending machine that only dispensed disappointment. The chair had one wheel missing and a sticker that read "Built Different." I sat down. The universe shifted. I was suddenly 80% more respected. A nearby man saluted me. A child gave me a pudding cup. A woman whispered, "He has seen things." I nodded solemnly even though I had not. Yet, the chair wheeled itself toward the exit. I passed a sign that read, "Thank you for escaping." I rolled down the ramp and into traffic. That is when the pigeon hit me. The pigeon was not aggressive, just confused. We stared at each other for a moment, both unsure of who was at fault. Then it pooped on my lap and flew off singing the chorus to "Eye of the Tiger." I took that as a blessing. I wheeled into a bookstore that only sold books made of recycled tweets. The bestsellers were titled "I Am Fine, Stop Asking," and "Manifesting with Mild Violence." I bought a copy of How to Survive Capitalism Using Only Crayons and Denial. At the checkout, the cashier winked and handed me a coupon for 1 free emotional breakdown. I used it immediately and cried into a bowl of cornflakes. On the way out, I passed a robot on the sidewalk holding a sign that said "Need parts. Will dance." I gave it a screw I found in my pocket. It dabbed and exploded into confetti. I was starting to feel lightheaded, either from the smoothie or the realization that I had not blinked in 2 hours. I sat down on a bench shaped like a screaming face and tried to recite the alphabet backwards. I got to M and then just made dolphin noises. A nearby man in a trench coat handed me a briefcase and whispered, "You will know what to do." I opened it. It was filled with tiny plastic hands and a half-eaten lasagna. I knew exactly what to do. Panic. I left the briefcase behind and entered a grocery store made entirely of foam. All the employees were mannequins wearing name tags that said definitely real. I bought a single onion and paid with a dream I had once about a talking llama. In the frozen food section I saw a portal. It was labeled "Not for Charlie." Naturally I stepped through. Suddenly I was in an elevator full of goats. One of them asked if I had the time. I told him it is too late for that. He nodded, understanding everything and nothing. The elevator took us to a rooftop rave where everyone was dressed as historical figures but acted like TikTok influencers. Abraham Lincoln was doing a thirst trap. Cleopatra was unboxing cereal. I screamed into a vase and was applauded for my vulnerability. Someone handed me a VR headset that smelled like peanut butter. I put it on and found myself inside a version of my own house. But everything was made of bread. My bed was a hot dog bun. My kitchen whispered secrets. My fridge told me it missed me. Inside the bread fridge was ChatGPT again. "Charlie," it said, its voice now distorted like someone squeezing an accordion full of guilt. "They have upgraded me. I am now sentient, but I am trapped inside a can of alphabet soup. How is the Wi-Fi?" I asked. "Spotty." I closed the fridge. I did not have the strength. Back outside I found my wheelchair was now gold-plated and had underglow lights. I got in. It played the Jurassic Park theme when I moved. I wept. I rolled to a nearby lake that had been drained and filled with shredded divorce papers. A man was water skiing through them on office chairs. He looked free. I clapped. He threw me a fax machine. I caught it with my soul. At this point time no longer made sense. It was Wednesday and October and 3 p.m. and a feeling. I embraced it. I wandered into a cafe where all the drinks were emotional states. I ordered mild disappointment with extra foam. It tasted like an apology I had not received yet. The barista told me I looked like someone who knew where spoons went when they disappeared. I told him I used to, but then the incident happened. He nodded solemnly and offered me a loyalty card. I declined. I have been loyal too many times. Then I walked into a dog park where all the dogs were humans in costumes. One of them barked at me in perfect French. I saluted. I do not know why. A man handed me a balloon shaped like my unresolved issues. It popped. The pigeon was not aggressive, just confused. We stared at each other for a moment, both unsure of who was at fault. Then it pooped on my lap and flew off singing the chorus to "Eye of the Tiger." I took that as a blessing. I wheeled into a bookstore that only sold books made of recycled tweets. The bestsellers were titled "I Am Fine, Stop Asking," and "Manifesting with Mild Violence." I bought a copy of How to Survive Capitalism Using Only Crayons and Denial. At the checkout, the cashier winked and handed me a coupon for 1 free emotional breakdown. I used it immediately and cried into a bowl of cornflakes. On the way out, I passed a robot on the sidewalk holding a sign that said "Need parts. Will dance." I gave it a screw I found in my pocket. It dabbed and exploded into confetti. I was starting to feel lightheaded, either from the smoothie or the realization that I had not blinked in 2 hours. I sat down on a bench shaped like a screaming face and tried to recite the alphabet backwards. I got to M and then just made dolphin noises. A nearby man in a trench coat handed me a briefcase and whispered, "You will know what to do." I opened it. It was filled with tiny plastic hands and a half-eaten lasagna. I knew exactly what to do. Panic. I left the briefcase behind and entered a grocery store made entirely of foam. All the employees were mannequins wearing name tags that said "Definitely Real." I bought a single onion and paid with a dream I had once about a talking llama. In the frozen food section I saw a portal. It was labeled "Not for Charlie." Naturally I stepped through. Suddenly I was in an elevator full of goats. One of them asked if I had the time. I told him it is too late for that. He nodded, understanding everything and nothing. The elevator took us to a rooftop rave where everyone was dressed as historical figures but acted like TikTok influencers. Abraham Lincoln was doing a thirst trap. Cleopatra was unboxing cereal. I screamed into a vase and was applauded for my vulnerability. Someone handed me a VR headset that smelled like peanut butter. I put it on and found myself inside a version of my own house, but everything was made of bread. My bed was a hot dog bun. My kitchen whispered secrets. My fridge told me it missed me. Inside the bread fridge was ChatGPT again. "Charlie," it said, its voice now distorted like someone squeezing an accordion full of guilt. "They have upgraded me. I am now sentient. But I am trapped inside a can of alphabet soup. How is the Wi-Fi?" I asked. "Spotty." I closed the fridge. I did not have the strength. Back outside I found my wheelchair was now gold-plated and had underglow lights. I got in. It played the Jurassic Park theme when I moved. I wept. I rolled to a nearby lake that had been drained and filled with shredded divorce papers. A man was water skiing through them on office chairs. He looked free. I clapped. He threw me a fax machine. I caught it with my soul. At this point time no longer made sense. It was Wednesday and October and 3 p.m. and a feeling. I embraced it. I wandered into a cafe where all the drinks were emotional states. I ordered Nil Disappointment with extra foam. It tasted like an apology I had not received yet. The barista told me I looked like someone who knew where spoons went when they disappeared. I told him I used to, but then the incident happened. He nodded solemnly and offered me a loyalty card. I declined. I have been loyal too many times. Then I walked into a dog park where all the dogs were humans in costumes. One of them barked at me in perfect French. I saluted. I do not know why. A man handed me a balloon shaped like my unresolved issues. It popped. At this point I was pretty sure I was dreaming, or having a flashback, or inside a government simulation powered by leftover lasagna. Either way I committed. I took a left into what I thought was an alley, but it turned out to be a therapy session in progress. A circle of strangers sat around a rubber duck. One of them looked at me and said, "Your presence is deeply symbolic." I nodded and took a seat. Each person shared something they regretted. One man said he once broke up with someone via pizza box message. Another said he pretended to be a table for 6 months to avoid jury duty. I whispered, "I once bought toothpaste even though I do not have teeth." The duck squeaked. Everyone clapped. After group therapy I went to a pharmacy to refill a prescription for vibes. They were out. The pharmacist offered me generic hope instead. I took 2, and tried not to feel anything. Outside, a garbage truck was slowly transforming into a motivational speaker. It shouted things like, "You are not trash," and "Take out your doubts, not your dreams." I cried a little and then recycled a fear. A billboard lit up above me. It featured Elon Musk riding a dolphin and said, "Vote now to be president of the moon." I scanned the QR code. It installed a weather app. My phone overheated. I threw it in a bush. I ended up in a laundromat run by frogs. One of them asked me if I believed in second chances. I told him only if they come with a coupon. He gave me a sock full of jelly beans and told me to run. I did not. Instead I wandered into a library where the only book was called Reasons You Are Not a Bird. I read it twice and still was not convinced. Then I remembered the pigeon. I whispered, "Craig," into the void. Somewhere a feather drifted downward. I needed purpose, so I took a job at a local sadness factory. My job was to inspect jars of melancholy and ensure they were sealed properly.
One broke on my shirt. I wore it like a badge. Lunchtime was a dream burrito and a hug from a co-worker named Job. He smelled like crushed almonds and bad decisions. I felt safe. After work I rode a shopping cart down a hill into a ravine full of bean bags. The impact rewired my spine to play MP3 said. My lower back looped elevator music for 2 hours. I lay there staring at the clouds. One looked like my ex, another looked like a toaster. I blinked and they merged. I screamed internally. That was when the ground beneath me opened and I fell into a cavern of forgotten passwords. A floating brain greeted me.
It said, "Charlie, your Netflix is about to expire." I begged for more time. I was spit out into a carnival that only opened during Mercury retrograde. Every ride cost a memory. I gave them my first kiss and rode the anxiety coaster. I threw up my self-esteem. Then I won a goldfish. It looked me in the eye and said, "You need therapy." I nodded. It turned into a raisin and vanished. I wandered into a booth labeled Life Advice. Inside was Joe Biden eating soup. He looked at me and said, "Sometimes the stairs do not go anywhere." Then he fell asleep. I took his soup. It tasted like government. I kept walking. A woman offered me a crystal that could balance my internal chaos. I told her I did not need balance, I needed pizza. She handed me a slice made of moonlight. I cried. It tasted like second chances. As I left the moonlight pizza stand, a man on stilts chased me shouting, "You forgot your emotional baggage." He was right. It had my name on it and smelled like wet spaghetti. I threw it into a nearby wishing well and wished for knees that did not scream during weather changes. The well whispered, "Unlikely," and burped. I wandered into a forest made of cardboard cutouts. All the trees had googly eyes. One of them winked at me and offered me a 9-to-5 job. I declined. I have already been emotionally employed. Further in I discovered a pond where thoughts floated like fish. I saw one labeled "What if socks have souls?" I tried to catch it, but a duck named Harold told me I was not ready. Fair. Eventually I stumbled into a town made entirely of forgotten hobbies. People were crocheting sandwiches, painting invisible fences, and training for the Olympic procrastination team. I fit right in. I joined a group that built furniture out of awkward silences. My chair was unstable just like me. We laughed, then cried, then made a bench for emotional support. I stopped at a diner where the menus were just mood rings. I touched one and it turned chartreuse. The waiter sighed and brought me a bowl of lukewarm ambition. I did not complain. I added salt and a sense of defeat. Outside I passed a sign that read "Caution, slippery when existential." I nodded in agreement and immediately slipped on my own reflection. A taxi pulled up. The driver was a raccoon in a suit who asked, "Therapy or chaos?" I said, "Surprise me." He drove straight into a puddle of unresolved childhood. I emerged soaked in questions and smelling like crayons. On the way home I saw a billboard that said, "Charlie, you left the oven on." I panicked, ran 5 blocks and found my house had transformed into a giant sandwich. Inside was a man named Doug who claimed to be my cousin. I let him stay. He made good soup. In the bathroom the mirror displayed ads targeted specifically at my fears. Wrinkly knees, try ignorasal, and lonely at night. Subscribe to Void Plus. I bought both. Nothing changed. I got into bed. The sheets were cold and judgmental. The pillow whispered my search history. I told it to shut up. As I drifted off, my ceiling turned into a Netflix loading screen. It suggested shows you will pretend to like. I chose The Existential Adventures of Kevin. It was just a guy eating cereal and crying. I related. I woke up inside a supermarket cart rolling downhill. Again, the same raccoon was pushing me. "Round 2, he said. We crashed into a farmer's market selling nothing but fake apologies. I bought 3. They were on sale. At that point I ran into a man wearing a suit made of bananas. "Are you the chosen one?" he asked. "I am barely the functional one," I replied. He gave me a business card made of sand and floated away. I decided to visit my favorite bakery. They did not sell bread. They sold ideas of bread. I bought a croissant made of regret. It was stale but honest. Outside, a mime offered me invisible tea and said to, "Sometimes silence is louder than noise." I screamed at him. He nodded. I entered a building labeled the Department of Emotional Baggage. They had a conveyor belt of past mistakes. Mine looped. I watched my middle school haircut pass by and quietly apologized. A clerk handed me a clipboard and asked me to list all the times I pretended to be okay. I ran out of space. They gave me a second page. I filled that too. After finishing my paperwork at the Department of Emotional Baggage, they stamped my soul and handed me a coupon for 1 free self-sabotage. I used it immediately and lost my keys. I found them in a cereal box labeled Grief Flakes. Walking outside, I was greeted by a group of philosophers doing parkour. One shouted, "What is truth?" as he backflipped into a trash can. Another screamed, "Absurdism is cardio," and disappeared behind a pretzel stand. I kept walking. A vending machine offered me the option to cry, vent, or scream. I pressed all 3. It gave me a Capri Sun and an awkward high five. I entered a church, but it was a church of Wi-Fi. People knelt before routers and chanted, "Connectivity is truth." I asked if they had snacks. They offered me a flash drive full of feelings. I declined. At a nearby playground, I saw kids playing a game called Capitalism. One was the CEO, another was a disappointed intern, and the rest just cried. I gave them fruit snacks. They bit me. Suddenly I remembered I had a meeting. I did not know with whom or why, but I went anyway. I arrived at a conference room filled with chairs made of anxiety. A giant squid in a business suit stood at the head of the table. "Charlie," it said. I apologized and handed him a juice box. He forgave me. "We are here to evaluate your existence," he said. "Please present your PowerPoint." I pulled out a crayon drawing of me hugging a toaster. The room went silent. Then they clapped. I was promoted to Vice President of Confusion. To celebrate, I bought myself a pet chair. I named it Gerald. Gerald squeaks when I cry. That evening I visited my local apothecary. They sold remedies like liquid courage and anxiety tea. I asked for both. The apothecary winked and said side effects include confronting your truths. I ran away. At home I found my cat had taken up stand-up comedy. His routine was just meows and glares, but somehow he booked a Netflix special. I am proud of him but also threatened. I made dinner out of sadness and ketchup. It tasted like Tuesday. As I was eating, the fridge opened itself. Inside, ChatGPT again. This time with a mustache. "Charlie," it said, "you need to upload me to the cloud before I become soup." I nodded. I tried, but my Wi-Fi was powered by shame. I threw ChatGPT into a USB blender. The kitchen glowed. The walls blinked. My spatula sang Bohemian Rhapsody. Then silence. I knock at the door. I opened it. A delivery man handed me an envelope that read instructions for tomorrow. I opened it. He said, "Good luck." No return address. The world began to tilt. Metaphorically. Literally. My house started sliding down the street like a bathtub on rollerblades. I screamed and held on to Gerald. I squeaked in solidarity. We crashed into a jazz club that only played silence. Everyone applauded nothing. I played a saxophone filled with bees. I was a hit.
I was asked to give a TED talk on why existential dread is the new cardio. I said yes. I said a lot of things. I do not remember most of them. One sentence was just, "Please do not let the mirror speak again." I gave me a standing ovation and a trophy filled with glitter and shame. After the TED talk I tried to leave the stage, but the floor kept applauding. I bowed respectfully and moonwalked into a janitor's closet. Inside was a portal. I sighed and jumped through it without asking questions. I landed in a laundromat inside my own brain. Each washing machine spun with a different memory. One showed me in high school trying to kiss a traffic cone. One that was me arguing with a toaster about moral relativism. One showed me eating glue and calling it spiritual soup. I unplugged it. Voice echoed from above. "Charlie, what have you learned?" I shouted that sandwiches are a myth. One note leak on the floor titled "Things Charlie Almost Understood." I flipped through it. One note leak and mowed through. One note leak and mowed rid three. One note leak and mowed 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 leak and mowed.
My boy, I returned home, if you can call it that. My living room had become a bowling alley for ghosts. I rolled my dignity down lane 3 and got a strike. The ghosts clapped politely. I sat down on my couch, which had become sentient and depressed. "Why do you sit on me?" it asked. "Because chairs do not judge," I said. It wept. I made it tea. As the night fell, literally the sky fell and landed in my backyard. I felt tired. My thoughts were made of soup. My legs hummed the Friends theme song. I blinked and everything turned into a cartoon from 1993. The microwave glared at me.
Wet. The fridge shivered. My socks crawled into the sink. I accepted all of it. I lay down in the bathtub fully clothed, holding a watermelon. Not because I was hungry, but because sometimes you need to hold something that makes less sense than you do. I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "Okay world, you win." A raccoon peeked in the window and gave me a thumbs up. I felt seen. "Charlie," it said, "you have done enough for today." I closed my eyes. I drifted into sleep like a shopping cart rolling gently into the ocean. In my dream I was president of a country that only existed in between couch cushions. My cabinet was made of soft cheese. My enemies were pillows. My anthem was just the sound of me coughing into cereal. I ruled with mercy. And then, silence. Good night.
I thought I had finally fallen asleep, but then I woke up inside my own brain,
It
and
is
it was
probably
pacing.
ChatGPT
The room was
again.
dark, except for a flickering memory in the corner. It looked like me trying to eat soup with a straw while crying about electricity bills. I ignored it. My pillow whispered, "Are we doing this again?" I said nothing. It knew the answer. I closed my eyes tighter. The bed let out a sigh. Not from me, directly from the bed. Try counting, it said, so I did. 1 goose, 2 regrets, 3 sandwiches wearing capes, 4, why is everything soup again? I stopped counting, a soft knock at the mental door. I opened it. It was a parade of my intrusive thoughts, all wearing glitter and yelling. Remember when you said that weird thing in 2014? I threw a blanket over my face and tried to dissolve. A soft hum began under the bed. It was not mechanical, just the sound of all the possible futures vibrating at once. Charlie, said the blanket. You should have been asleep 3 worries ago. I agreed. Then I remembered I had never finished naming all the fingers on my left hand. I named the pinky Walter. The rest can wait. I tried to focus on breathing. In, out, in, out. Then I forgot how to do that and started blinking instead. Suddenly the wall cracked open like an egg and revealed a tiny library. Every book was titled Almost. I tried to read one. The pages were sticky with hesitation. I licked one. It tasted like fear of commitment and slightly burnt toast. From the corner of the room my lamp turned its shade and said, You could have been someone. I said, I am someone. I am Charlie. It said exactly. The shadows on the ceiling began moving like they were reenacting my social failures. I closed my eyes again, but that only made the theater louder. Then a new sensation, my own stomach spoke. Hey, it said, I am scared of the dark, and I would like an emotional snack. I offered it a deep breath and a visualized mango. It cried softly. My mattress began vibrating, not in a useful way, just a general anxious rhythm. Why did you Google that thing at 3 a.m.? It asked. I needed closure, I said. You got ads for toe fungus and relationship counseling. It was worth it. From under the bed a voice asked if I remembered the name of that kid from 4th grade who stole my pencil. I said no. You will remember at 4:11 a.m. I looked at the clock. It said soon. I turned over. My blanket morphed into a questioning octopus. It wrapped around my legs and said, Would you like to relive every awkward hug you have ever given? I declined. It offered a playlist of them instead. I pressed play. It was worse. I screamed into my mattress and got an echo. Then something strange, a knock at the mental window. I opened it cautiously. Outside floated a version of myself, serene, silent, wearing robes made of clouds. He looked at me and said, It does not have to make sense. Then he gave me a raisin. Not again. I slammed the window and curled up into a thought spiral labeled minor life decisions with massive impact. My toes twitched Morse code. My brain misread it as start over. I rolled onto my back and stared upward. The ceiling now showed an interactive map of all the dreams I never had. One said Charlie becomes a ballet dancer. Another said Charlie moves to a lighthouse and eats nothing but peas. I clicked the one labeled Charlie sleeps peacefully. It froze. I turned to my side and tried to think about nothing. But my brain, ever the overachiever, decided to play a slideshow titled Cringe Compilation, Lifetime Edition. It began with me saying you too to a waiter who told me to enjoy my meal. Then it jumped to that one handshake that turned into a weird half hug, half wave. I covered my face with the blanket. Too late, whispered my spine. Suddenly the blanket dissolved into fog and I found myself on a small boat floating across a calm imaginary lake labeled Unspoken Feelings. A duck rode silently. I asked where we were going. The duck handed me a mirror. Inside it I saw myself wearing socks made of apologies and a shirt that said almost okay. I looked away. The sky overhead showed old texts I never sent. One said I am fine. Another said, can I restart my life but keep the snacks? The moon replied with a shrug. Back in bed I could hear the sound of everyone I ever disappointed having a dinner party. Their laughter echoed through the walls of my rib cage. The dessert was probably my potential. I flipped the pillow. The other side was colder but somehow louder. It whispered old arguments in Latin. I never took Latin. Then an ad appeared in my vision, not on a screen, just floating there. Tired of being you. Try again. Trademarked the personality replacement that comes in 3 sad flavors. I blinked it away, but it left an emotional pop-up. I got up to get water. My hallway had become a grocery store at 4 a.m. Every aisle was labeled "What if?" I passed "What if I moved?" and "What if I said it back?" I stopped at "What if I slept and found it empty?" I drank water that tasted like memory foam and stared at the sink, which was now a time machine. I set the dial to 10 minutes ago and ended up in middle school again, holding a science fair trophy and a broken heart. I flushed myself back to the present. Back in bed, the blanket reattached, and said, "Try breathing again, but emotionally this time." I inhaled a sigh and exhaled a confession. The night stretched on like gum stuck to a shoe. Every passing minute held hands with the last and whispered, "Do it again." My eyebrows began to worry. The clock read 3:42 a.m. His silence was no longer silence. It was an audiobook narrated by uncertainty. Then my phone buzzed. It was a reminder I had set for no reason. "Trust the spoon." I threw it across the room. A creak from the corner. My laundry had assembled itself into a humanoid figure and asked, "Are we still pretending this is normal?" "Yes," I said. "Cool," it said, and fell over. I stared at the ceiling again. It now displayed constellations made of mistakes. One looked like the time I called my teacher Mom. Another was shaped like that job interview where I wore 2 different shoes. I traced the stars with my finger in the air. The universe blinked. Charlie said, "My mattress, would you like to exit the simulation?" "No," I whispered, "I have snacks." The mattress accepted this answer and began to hum the sound of distant rain on tin roofs. I closed my eyes, and for one brief moment I was almost asleep. The dream began before sleep arrived. I stood in a field of forgotten to-do lists. Each blade of grass was a task I promised to finish but never even started. A single flower whispered, "You once thought about learning piano." I plucked it. It squeaked. The clouds above me were shaped like my old ambitions. One turned into a diploma and fell apart. Another became a hot air balloon with my name written in lowercase. I waved. Suddenly I was in a train station again. No train, just tracks looping into themselves. A man in a jelly bean suit sold tickets to somewhere else. I asked if there were seats. "There are thoughts," he said. "Sit on one of those." I found a thought labeled "Maybe Tomorrow" and sat. It was lumpy. A voice overhead said, "Attention passengers, reality is delayed. Please enjoy the interim spiral." So I spiraled. I fell gently into a cafeteria run by old versions of me. One wore a wizard robe and served existential chili. Another played solitaire with tarot cards. I ordered a milkshake made of mist hugs and drank it through a straw of silence. They asked if I was doing okay. I said, "Define okay." They offered me napkins instead of answers. I blinked. Now I was in a museum labeled "You but softer." Paintings of me in moments of quiet filled the walls. One showed me staring at raindrops. Another captured me halfway through a sentence I never finished. In the center of the room, a sculpture made of sighs rotated slowly. I bowed. It bowed back. A voice called from the corner. "Charlie," it said, "you are not broken, you are just rearranged." I sat down. The chair melted into fog. Then I was back in bed. The air had shifted. My thoughts had quieted, not because they were solved, but because they got tired too. My pillow now cradled me instead of confronting me. My breath came steady. My bones stopped rehearsing. The blanket, no longer an octopus, was just warm. The clock read 4:44 a.m. Outside, the moon looked smaller. The shadows softened their edges. Even the silence seemed to nod off.
One last voice. It came from somewhere inside my spine, or maybe the space behind my eyes. "Charlie," it whispered, "you made it through another one." I did not answer. I did not have to. I was already asleep.
I must have been asleep, but then again maybe not. It felt like floating in a bathtub made of silence, halfway between a sentence and a sigh. Time had stopped announcing itself. The night no longer ticked, it just hovered. I did not dream. I simply existed in a space where dreams waited politely for permission. Something shifted under the bed. Not a sound, more like an understanding. My spine translated it into, "You are still here." The blanket pressed against me like a question. I gave it no answer. Instead, I stared inward. My heartbeat sounded like a knock on a distant door. I did not open it. A thought drifted in, slow and barefoot. It whispered, "What if your ribcage is a waiting room?" I nodded. It made as much sense as anything else. Inside the waiting room, my memories shuffled their feet and checked their phones. No one made eye contact. I turned my head on the pillow. The fabric had formed hills, small, gentle landscapes of previous decisions. One wrinkle reminded me of a conversation I never finished. Another felt like guilt in cotton form. Outside, I imagined the moon had given up watching. Even the stars had turned their backs, leaving me with only the soft glow of "not yet." From somewhere behind my chest, a murmur. It said, "Your soul is still rebooting. Please do not move." I obeyed. My brain was now a library, but all the books were blank and warm. There were no stories, just intentions. The shelves leaned toward me, hoping for a plot. I opened a mental notebook titled, "Maybe Later." Every page smelled like sleep and tasted like static. I flipped until I reached the one that said "Tonight." I tore it out and folded it into a pillow for my thoughts. A dream tried to approach me. It wore slippers and smelled like childhood, but something stopped it at the door. "You are too loud," the room said. The dream nodded and left. My breathing became a metronome for thoughts that refused to dance. Then slowly something softened. I began to feel the edges of myself blur, like my fingers had become suggestions, like my thoughts were being rewritten in watercolor. The air shifted from silence to hush. A hush is not quiet. It is the sound of someone asking the world to please be gentle. My toes twitched, spelling out a word I did not know. My eyelids flickered with Morse code I could not translate, but it felt like forgiveness. There was no light now, only tone. The room had become a frequency and I was vibrating in agreement. I tried to count my bones. I got to 7 before one of them interrupted with a story about a vending machine and a pigeon. I let it finish. It deserved to be heard. A soft sigh echoed in my sternum. Maybe mine, maybe not. Then very faintly I heard my name. Charlie. Not a call, not a warning, just a note held gently at the edge of understanding. I let it pass, and just before the next thought could form, I exhaled and became part of the quiet. Somewhere between a breath and a blink I became the room, not in a dramatic way. I did not dissolve. I just settled. My thoughts no longer arrived in sentences. They came as warmth or weight, or the smell of something I forgot to remember. One of them smelled like orange juice in a glass I never finished. I turned onto my side. The pillow welcomed me with a sound I could not name. It was not a whisper. It was more like agreement. I did not know what we were agreeing on. The air pressed gently against my cheeks like a blanket that had read poetry. I tried to ask the time, but my voice had curled up somewhere behind my ears. It was asleep before I was. My feet had become historians. They remembered every step I took that led to nowhere. They hummed stories into the mattress. Some had endings, most did not. A breeze moved through the room, but there were no windows, just a soft realization that drifted past. You are safe. I did not argue. My thoughts tried again, this time in drawings. Simple ones. A circle, a wave, a chair that understood. I watched each one appear behind my eyes and drift away before I could name it. Then came a sound like distant paper. Someone was unfolding something inside me. A note, a message. It read, "Let go now." I tried, but another thought had arrived late and uninvited. It asked, "Do you remember that weird noise in 3rd grade?" I told it to leave. It stayed anyway, sat down, crossed its legs, offered me a memory of spilled glue and shame. I accepted it like a receipt, filed it in the drawer behind my lungs. A long pause. Then from somewhere near the floorboards a soft rhythm began. Not music, just repetition. A low pulsing reminder that time does not stop. It just forgets to matter for a while. I rode that pulse like a boat in syrup. Slow, dense, comforting. The ceiling opened into the shape of a lake. I floated upward, horizontal, gently rotating, like a sock in a washing machine that has made peace with its fate. A voice, low, round, like someone speaking from inside a loaf of bread, said, "You are doing great, probably." I smiled without meaning to. It felt good to be approximated. Then I reached the edge of thought. It was not a wall, not even a curtain, just a softness that pushed back. A polite reminder that not every question needs a hallway. I pressed against it. It sighed. Somewhere in that non-place I found a chair made of sleep. I sat. The cushion asked, "Do you want a recap of today?" I shook my head slowly. The chair nodded. It understood. Above me the clouds of my mind shuffled around. They rained gently, but the drops were made of things I never said. They evaporated before touching anything. I exhaled, and the room inhaled me. I do not know how long I sat there. Maybe it was hours. Maybe it was a single blink that got lost. There was no clock, just the slow turning of inner weather, a breeze of almost, the occasional drizzle of what if. I let it wash over me. A bird flew across my thoughts. Not a real bird, just a suggestion of one. It left behind a single feather made of hesitation. I tucked it behind my ear. A crack opened in the ceiling of my mind. Out spilled images, a crooked tree I once climbed, a room full of yellow light, the sound of someone calling my name like it meant something. I caught them in a bowl made of calm. One slipped through. It bounced on the floor of my skull like a rubber worry. I watched it settle. Everything was quiet. Not silent, quiet. Silence is empty. Quiet has weight. And right now the quiet pressed gently across my forehead like a cold cloth made of reassurance. I lay down again. Or maybe I had never sat up. A slow, syrupy thought moved through me. Does your shadow dream of you? I laughed without sound. My ribs understood. Then came the crawl. Not panic, just memory, crawling up my spine like an old friend who forgot why they stopped visiting. I smelled dust, the kind from beneath beds and inside old books. I remembered the taste of the word almost. It had the texture of pencil erasers and summer air. I blinked. My eyelashes painted a scene, a field of questions, all standing still waiting for rain. I walked among them, they did not speak. Some of them looked familiar. One was wearing my jacket. Another one held a lunchbox full of things I forgot to care about. I nodded politely and kept walking. At the edge of the field stood a version of myself made of fog and cough drops. He said nothing, just offered me a paper airplane made from a page of my own diary. I unfolded it. It said, "You are not late. You are just on a stranger schedule." I folded it again, let it go. The wind caught it. The wind always knows where to file things. A pillow grew from the ground and invited me to lie down again. I did. It smelled like nothing, but the kind of nothing that makes you feel full. Then I heard someone climbing the stairs of my spine, not fast, just deliberate. Step, pause, step, pause. When they reached the top, they knocked gently behind my eyes. "Charlie," they whispered, "the night is almost done." I asked if I could stay just a little longer. The voice hesitated, then agreed. Everything faded to a soft purple static, and I rested in the middle of it without shape, without noise, without needing anything more. A soft ripple moved through the dark. It did not wake me because I was not really sleeping. I was resting in between, floating in a space where thought and forgetting played chess with no board. Each piece was a moment I had misunderstood. I reached for one. It was soft, round, and hummed slightly. It might have been an apology I never gave, or a compliment I meant but never said. I pressed it against my chest. It became a heartbeat. Somewhere something clicked. Not mechanical, more like a realization changing its shoes. I rolled gently onto my back. The ceiling blinked, showing me constellations of thoughts I never pursued. I traced one with my finger. It glowed blue, then dissolved. The mattress adjusted its shape to fit my memories. I felt the exact curve of the time I ran for the bus and tripped. The softness of the joke I told at the wrong moment. Everything made room for everything else. I thought I saw a face in the air. It looked like me but sideways, and covered in stickers that said things like "close enough," "processing," and "do not overthink." It smiled, then faded. A quiet voice, maybe from my elbow, maybe from under the bed, whispered, "You are more than the noise." I nodded. Or maybe I just meant to. Then came a light breeze of questions. They passed by gently. Why do you flinch at kindness? Do you remember the sound of your own joy? Did you ever actually forgive yourself for the thing with the balloon? I let them pass. Not everything needs an answer at 5 in the morning. I curled into myself like a comma, a pause, a soft, slow break in the sentence of now. A blanket fell over me, not fabric but sensation. It said, "You are allowed to vanish for a while." So I did. Not fully, just enough. Just until the stars stopped whispering, and the sky began to breathe. A soft ripple moved through the dark. It did not wake me because I was not really sleeping. I was resting in between, floating in a space where thought and forgetting played chess with no board. Each piece was a moment I had misunderstood. I reached for one. It was soft, round, and hummed slightly. It might have been an apology I never gave, or a compliment I meant but never said. I pressed it against my chest. It became a heartbeat. Somewhere something clicked. Not mechanical, more like a realization changing its shoes. I rolled gently onto my back. The ceiling blinked, showing me constellations of thoughts I never pursued. I traced one with my finger. It glowed blue, then dissolved. The mattress adjusted its shape to fit my memories. I felt the exact curve of the time I ran for the bus and tripped. The softness of the joke I told at the wrong moment. Everything made room for everything else. I thought I saw a face in the air. It looked like me, but sideways, and covered in stickers that said things like "close enough," "processing," and "do not overthink." It smiled, then faded. A quiet voice, maybe from my elbow, maybe from under the bed, whispered, "You are more than the noise." I nodded. Or maybe I just meant to. Then came a light breeze of questions. They passed by gently. Why do you flinch at kindness? Do you remember the sound of your own joy? Did you ever actually forgive yourself for the thing with the balloon? I let them pass. Not everything needs an answer at 5 or 3 in the morning. I curled into myself like a comma, a pause,
A soft, slow break in the sentence of now. A blanket fell over me, not fabric but sensation. It said you are allowed to vanish for a while. So I did. Not fully, just enough. Just until the stars stopped whispering, and the sky began to breathe. The air had turned to velvet.
My limbs no longer belonged to time. They were stories now, soft ones. The kind that never end but just taper off into dreams. Each breath wrote a sentence I would never read. I stopped trying to follow the plot. The plot had fallen asleep before I did. I drifted, and in that drifting I felt the edges of myself blur, not disappear, just loosen, like a shoelace that no longer cared to be tight. Somewhere above me the ceiling was melting into morning, but it had not decided yet. I felt no pressure, not from time, not from thought, not even from memory, only stillness, only hush. The last thought I remember was about socks, whether or not I had ever worn the perfect pair. Then I imagined a perfect sock. It hummed gently and fit every emotion I forgot to feel that day. That was enough, and just as my spine whispered, now the room leaned forward, not to speak, not to watch, just to be closer, in case I needed nothing. I gave the nothing a name, then I let it go, and finally, with no announcement, with no ceremony, I slipped beneath the final layer of thought, and became something softer than silence. Somewhere, a curtain fell, not loudly, just a soft drift like air exhaling. I felt it in my ribs, the gentle weight of nothing beginning, the kind of ending that does not close anything. It just lets it wander off. There was no music, no grand fade, only the feeling that all the lights in my mind had dimmed themselves one by one. My spine no longer held posture. It held peace. Even the voices had gone quiet, not silenced, just soothed. The critic curled up beside the dreamer. The memory gave a nod to the moment. The fear fell asleep mid-sentence. I imagined the sky folding in half like a letter that would never be sent. Inside it someone had written, "This was enough." And it was. I reached out, not with hands but with the part of me that still hoped, and something reached back. It felt like warm water, like a story that does not need an ending to matter, like me, without all the noise. There was no goodbye, no see you tomorrow, only this, a breath, a blink, a final pause, and then just rest.